Today, we're diving into something I talk about all the time with my clients: stomach acidity and gastritis. If you've ever felt that burning, nagging discomfort in your upper belly, or if you've been told you have too much stomach acid, you're definitely not alone. This episode is going to clear up a lot of confusion and give you practical tools to feel better. We're going to talk about why these symptoms happen, how stress plays a bigger role than most people realize, and why the solution is not always just suppressing acid. Sometimes the real issue is that your stomach lining is not being properly protective, especially when stress starts interfering with your gut's natural defenses. So, if you're not sure what's driving your digestive symptoms or which foods might help versus hurt, I made a quick quiz that points you toward the right meal plan or free guide based on what you're dealing with. So, just head to my Instagram and DM me the words gut check, and I'll send you the quiz, and that'll help you determine what your next step is as far as a meal plan or free guide. So, whether you're listening on the podcast or catching the replay from Facebook, I am so glad you're here. And let's dive in. Let's talk about what is gastritis. I also want to lump under here the word dyspepsia because it's not the same thing, but these are under the same umbrella. Acid reflux can fall under this umbrella. Just pain and discomfort or burning in the upper gastric area. Let's break it down. Let's start with the basics. Gastritis is actually inflammation of the stomach lining, and it can feel like a burning sensation in the upper abdomen, maybe under your ribs, maybe off to the left or in the center, bloating, nausea, or even a sense of fullness after just a few bites of food. So if you eat just a few bites of food and you feel full already, that can be an indication of gastritis. Not everyone experiences it the same way. Some people feel like this sharp pain, like a dagger is in their stomach. Other people just feel a little off. So dyspepsia, a lot of times presenting as like a gnawing or just a discomfort. People just talk about their stomach just always feels upset and they talk about a gnawing discomfort. So that's not always caused by inflammation, dyspepsia, and it might feel more like pressure, fullness, an annoying sensation that something just isn't quite right after you eat. And here's what's really interesting. Both of these issues can be connected to the same root causes, even if there's no ulcer or actual hole in the stomach lining. And one of the big ones is stress. Chronic stress does not just interfere with digestion, it also impacts the protective mucus layer that lines your stomach. So, we actually need a strong gut brain connection to kick off digestion properly. And that connection, when it's activated in a relaxed parasympathetic state, so when we're in that rest and digest mode, we're calm, it opens up the signaling, stimulating the production of not only stomach acid, but also that thick protective mucus layer that shields our stomach lining from that acid. I talk about this all the time. When we're in that stressed fight or flight state, that pinches off the signaling between the gut and the brain. That signaling that's responsible for producing stomach acid, producing enzymes, releasing bile, and also producing that thick mucus coating that protects our stomach from the acid. So not only when we're in that stress fight or flight mode, that signaling is pinched off to some extent, and our body dials down the stimulation of digestive secretions and also the stimulation of that mucus coating. So what we end up with is a thin, depleted mucus layer that makes us extra sensitive, even to normal levels of acid. So when someone says they have too much acid, it might actually be that their stomach lining isn't protected the way that it should be. And that's why soothing these symptoms is not just about blocking acid, it's about rebuilding the body's ability to protect itself and function the way that it's meant to. Next, let's bust some of the big myths about stomach acid because this is just a huge, hairy area with our medical system. There's a lot of confusion about it. And these myths are not just floating around on social media. These are things people are often told in the doctor's office too. So I want to walk you through a few of the big ones and help you see what's actually going on underneath the surface. Myth number one, you have too much acid and you need to suppress it. This is probably the most common one. We associate burning or reflux with too much acid, but it's often not about too much acid. It's not even about quantity. It's about acid being in the wrong place in the case of heartburn or reflux, or stomach lining that's lost its ability to protect itself. And that's what we see with the gastritis and the dyspepsia. Like we talked about earlier, stress can deplete that thick mucus layer that normally keeps acid from irritating the stomach. So even normal levels of acid can feel like too much when your lining is thin or inflamed. Myth number two, acidic foods are the enemy. Tomatoes, citrus, vinegar, yes, they're acidic, but that does not mean they're automatically harmful to the stomach. In normal health of the digestive tract and the stomach, we eat acidic foods all the time. You ate these as a child, you ate these most of your life, and you felt okay. So it's not about the foods being an issue, because when our mucus layer is nice and thick as it's supposed to, it protects your stomach from those acidic components. Yeah, and I've had plenty of clients, including myself, who can tolerate foods like orange juice, tomato, lemon, or even fermented foods once we've addressed this root cause of the issue. So it's not about eliminating everything acidic forever. It's about supporting your body so that it can tolerate those foods again down the line. Because most of these are nutritious foods that give us lots of great nutrients. And also, they're the foods that we love the most very often, which was definitely the case with me. So myth number three is that you just need to take an antacid or PPI and you'll be fine. These meds can absolutely bring short-term relief in some cases, and sometimes they're necessary. But long-term, they don't rebuild your stomach lining or correct the underlying issue. They don't restore mucus, improve vagal tone, or get your digestive system functioning the way it's supposed to. In some cases, they can even make things worse by lowering acid too much, which then impacts digestion and absorption downstream, leading to nutrient deficiencies and related issues in the future. And here's the other piece that gets overlooked. Sometimes people are experiencing symptoms of low stomach acid, but because it feels like burning or reflux, it gets treated like high stomach acid, and that can make the problem worse. So let me just give you an example. Let's say you have low stomach acid. So you're digesting your food more slowly. And alongside that, because the same mechanisms that stimulate acid production, which is having that open, super open highway between the brain and the gut, where the brain can tell the gut to produce stomach acid. So let's see, that signaling is pinched off from stress and we're not producing enough stomach acid, we're also not producing enough mucus. So we have low stomach acid production and a low mucus lining. We see these two very commonly occurring side by side. And so you're feeling these symptoms of burning because you don't have enough acid production. So the food is sitting in your stomach longer, taking longer to digest, making that acidity irritate the lining even more, especially in the picture of the mucus layer being thinned out. So we need to zoom out and look at the full picture: stress levels, digestion patterns, timing of meals, and how well your gut is actually functioning. Now let's talk about foods that calm versus foods that flare. All right, because this is usually where people feel the most confused and frustrated. You're trying to eat healthy, you're trying to do the right thing, and somehow your stomach feels even more irritated and inflamed. So let's break it down. When the stomach lining is irritated or that protective mucus barrier is thinned out, certain foods can feel like they're adding fuel to the fire. And so they're not the cause of the issue, but they're exacerbating the symptoms. So this would be spicy foods. So especially those with chili peppers, The spicier it is, these foods can increase blood flow and stimulate acid secretion, which might be too much for an already sensitive stomach lining to handle. They can also activate pain receptors, making that existing irritation feel even more intense. Fried or greasy meals actually slow down stomach emptying. So, as we were just talking about, that means food and acid sits in the stomach for longer. And that extra time in contact with the inflamed lining can worsen symptoms like burning or pressure. Plus, high fat meals can actually weaken the tone of the lower esophageal sphincter, that sphincter between your throat and your stomach, and that can allow acid to move up, causing heartburn as the acid enters your esophagus or reflux. The next irritating food can be acidic drinks like coffee or alcohol. These are particularly irritating when the mucus barrier is thin. Coffee, whether it's regular or decaf, can increase acid production and also relax the lower esophageal sphincter. Alcohol can directly damage the stomach lining and further suppress that protective mucus layer. And then we have heavily processed foods and additives. A lot of processed foods often contain emulsifiers, artificial sweeteners, and preservatives that can disrupt the gut lining and the microbiome. So, some of these compounds may actually increase inflammation or irritate sensitive tissue, especially when the stomach's natural defenses are already compromised. On the flip side, here's the good news. There are foods that can feel soothing and supportive while the stomach lining heals. And I actually have a 7-day gastritis meal plan that you can download in the show notes to let you hit the ground running with a soothing, healing diet to calm down your symptoms right away. These foods help the lining heal, not just because they're bland, but also because of the way that they interact with the digestive system. So, I'm going to list the top foods here: soft cooked rice and plain oatmeal. These two act like gentle buffers. They're easy to digest, they're low in acidity, and they don't trigger additional acid release. Bananas are also easy to digest. Plus, they contain compounds like pectin and natural prebiotics that can support the gut lining without irritation and feed beneficial bacteria in the intestines. Bone broth is another wonderful food for gastritis. It's high in amino acids like lysine and glutamine, and those help to nourish and repair the gut lining. Those are gut healing amino acids, and they're found in bone broth. Mashed sweet potato offers a comforting texture and is packed with anti-inflammatory nutrients and soluble fiber. Soluble fiber tends to be gentler on inflamed tissue. And then I love, love, love recommending and drinking aloe vera juice. It's one of my main go-tos. Not only is it soothing, it's anti-inflammatory and it calms the irritating tissue, reduces discomfort. It's very soothing in the moment in cooling that inflammation, but it also supports the production of that mucus layer. So it supports protective mucus production. So it helps actually to rebuild that inner barrier between your stomach lining and its own acid. Even things like the form of the food are important here. Eating blended soups or stewed fruits are great here because they're blended and cooked. So when we blend and cook, it breaks down the structure of the fibers in the foods and makes it easier for your stomach to empty. So the food's not just sitting there, gives your stomach less work to do. Also, it's easier on the lining of the stomach. So, speaking of fiber, there's a lot of confusion about fiber. People hear that it's good for the gut, which it definitely is, but timing and type matter. And when you're in the middle of a gastritis flare, this may not be the best time to go full force on building up your gut microbiome with fiber. So we need to be strategic. If your gut lining is raw and inflamed, eating a big salad or lots of roughage is like rubbing sandpaper on a rug burn. It doesn't mean fiber is bad, it just means your gut isn't ready for that kind of mechanical stimulation yet. So during the flare, we want to focus on soft, cooked, and blended fiber sources like mashed carrots, stewed apples, zucchini that's cooked soft, or a veggie puree blended into a soup. Later, once things have calmed down, we can start to rebuild that tolerance and bring in more variety. But for now, it's all about gentle, loving your gut lining and nourishing it. And then later, once things have calmed down, we can start to bring in more variety and rebuild that tolerance. So the other thing that's important here is meal timing. Large, heavy meals can increase pressure in the stomach and delay stomach emptying, and that makes you even more uncomfortable. So try eating smaller portions more frequently and give yourself a little bit of time to digest before laying down or rushing on to the next thing. Even something as simple as sitting down to eat, chewing well, and staying present with your meals can make a big difference in how your body handles food. So, one of the things that we teach our clients is mindful eating for digestion, mindfulness, eating hygiene, slowing down, taking your time, chewing up your food, eating until you're no longer hungry versus eating until you're full, taking a minute or two to relax and deep breathe before you start eating to open up the signaling between the brain and the gut. So, those are the things we're talking about here. Next, I want to get a little bit deeper into that stress and digestion link. We can't talk about stomach acidity or gastritis without talking about stress. And I know when you hear someone say that your gut issues are just stress, I know how invalidating that can feel, especially when you've been dealing with real physical symptoms. But truthfully, stress does not just live in your head, it has real physiological effects on your digestion, especially when it comes to acid production and the health of your stomach lining. So here's what's happening behind the scenes when you're in a relaxed parasympathetic state, which is that rest and digest mode, your body produces stomach acid and mucus at the same time. It's a balanced system. You create the acid to break down your food and the mucus to protect your stomach from the acid. But under chronic stress, your nervous system shifts into sympathetic or fight or flight mode. This turns down acid production, slows digestive motility, so slows stomach emptying, and also interferes with the production of the mucus layer. So now you're left with a sensitive stomach, thin mucus, and poor signaling to even move the food out of the stomach. So that creates a perfect storm for acid related discomfort. And this was actually my story when I first started my practice. I was dealing with GERD and chronic constipation that I had never had before. It flared up right around the time after I started my private practice, which was very stressful. And I couldn't figure out what was wrong. I was told to take PPIs, omeprazole, and anxiety meds. And for me, like many of my clients report to me, the PPIs didn't help at all. Some people, they help. Other people, they don't do anything. I was one of those people. They didn't help at all. And the side effects of the anxiety meds were just as bad as the original symptoms for me. I felt totally stuck. I was afraid to eat. I was afraid not to eat because the acidity of the empty stomach also caused reflux. No one was checking in on me or helping me figure out what was actually driving my symptoms, my acid levels, my motility with my constipation, and no one was talking about my stomach's ability to protect itself. I did make the connection that stress was an issue. I did notice that symptoms were worse with stress. And with this kind of landscape of my life at the time, there was always stress. I was always stressed. But then I did notice the connection between more stress making my symptoms worse. So I started learning how to calm my stress, which is not something you do in a snap of the fingers. It was something I was working on over time and got better and better at. I also started supporting my gut brain connection and getting my nervous system out of that constant on state, that constant sympathetic state. And for me, that was the big game changer. The cutting out the trigger foods was helpful, but I was still having baseline symptoms. It was not the solution. I was still having the symptoms, sometimes even regardless of the diet. And that's true with many of my clients as well. So Working on my nervous system was really the key for me, and that's how I finally started to find lasting relief, and that's how I maintain relief to this day. And the best part of this is I didn't need to keep cutting out more and more foods to get there. Because honestly, before that, I was miserable. I had cut out so many of my favorite foods: coffee, tomato sauce, onions, citrus, lemon, oranges. And those were some of my favorite things to eat. And so it wasn't just physically uncomfortable, it was emotionally exhausting and depressing. I felt like I was living in fear of food, constantly second guessing what I could eat. And it was just depressing to think I might never eat those foods again. So once I started really addressing the actual root cause, which for me was the stress, I was able to reintroduce those foods. And now I eat those foods all the time with zero issues. And so that was such a huge moment of freedom. And it's something that I want every single one of our clients to experience too. So that's why I always say healing your gut is not just about what you're eating, it's about how your body is showing up to a meal. And practices like deep breathing before meals, chewing slowly, taking a few moments to smell your food, these aren't just mindfulness trends. These actually help activate your vagus nerve and shift your body into that parasympathetic state. And over time, those little habits can help retrain your system to digest more efficiently and rebuild that protective barrier. You don't have to be perfect, just consistent. Even something as simple as putting your phone away while eating or taking 3 slow breaths before your first bite of food can help reset that gut brain connection and support the healing process. So let's talk a little bit more about how to support and rebuild the stomach lining. Once we understand that the problem is not just too much acid, but more of a lack of protection, the focus shifts from suppression to rebuilding. The goal is to strengthen that mucus barrier, calm inflammation, and restore your stomach's natural defenses so it can tolerate normal digestion again. There are a few key tools I'll share with you now that I use regularly with my clients to help support this healing process. So, the first up is DGL or deglycerinated licorice. In supplemental form, it helps soothe and coat the stomach lining and it actually stimulates mucus production. So, think of it like putting a gentle protective layer back in place while your body repairs itself. I often recommend chewable forms taken before meals, which are both convenient and effective. Another great one is zinc carnosine. This is a specific form of zinc that's been well studied for its role in protecting the gut lining, reducing inflammation, and supporting tissue repair. It helps the stomach lining rebuild without shutting down stomach acid production, which makes it especially helpful in cases where we want healing without long-term acid suppression, which is many of the cases, as we've talked about. And then there are other herbs like slippery elm and marshmallow root. These are both high in mucilage, which is a gel-like substance that coats and soothes the lining of the GI tract. These are especially helpful for people dealing with that raw, irritated sensation or constant upper GI discomfort. Aloe vera, which we talked about earlier, also fits into this category because in addition to soothing inflammation, it also stimulates that protective layer. And a lot of your gut healing GERD supplements have a combination of these ingredients. Now, I do want to mention if you suspect H. pylori is playing a role, it's critical to be tested for it and treated properly because this is a bacteria that can interfere with both acid and mucus production and make healing a lot harder. So, how do you know if you might have H. pylori involved? Common signs include dull, persistent upper stomach pain that is not always tied to meals. So you might have this pain anytime during the day. Also, frequent nausea, bloating, or feeling full quickly after eating. Some people notice belching or appetite changes. So you'll notice these are a lot of the symptoms that just describe gastritis itself. So the only real way to know for sure is through testing. And H. pylori is tested for either through a breath test or a stool antigen test, which your GI doctor can order. This is also something that I help my clients navigate in my practice especially when we're seeing patterns that suggest an underlying infection could be at play. Because if H. pylori is involved, just managing your symptoms isn't going to cut it. We actually have to deal with the root cause, clear the bacteria to get real relief. So, what I want you to take away from this is that your body wants to heal. You're not broken. You're not slapped with this chronic diagnosis that's going to be with you forever and torture you forever. You just need to give your system the right conditions to do what it's designed to do. And once inflammation calms and the mucus barrier is restored, foods that once felt impossible, like citrus, tomatoes, coffee, onions, can often be tolerated again. And that's the part that so many people miss. Healing your stomach is not about building a longer list of no foods. It's about repairing the lining so you can say yes to more foods over time. All right, you guys, I really hope that today's episode gives you a big sigh of relief because I know so many of you listening are dealing with these symptoms right now. Having been through it myself, I remember how scary and frustrating it felt to not know what was going on, to be told to just avoid a long list of foods, or to feel like I'd never be able to enjoy the things I loved again. But healing is possible. These symptoms don't mean you're broken, and they definitely don't mean you're stuck eating plain chicken and rice forever. This is temporary. You can heal. And honestly, I feel a sigh of relief just talking about this, and I hope that you feel it too listening. If you're ready for the next step, I did create a 7-day meal plan for gastritis that you can download in the show notes. It's designed to give your stomach a break and help you feel better fast by removing the foods that are likely triggering symptoms right now while we work on fixing the actual root of the problem. And if you want support that's personalized, I'd love to hear more about what you're going through. I offer a free 15-minute strategy call where we can talk about your symptoms, what you've tried so far, and what it might look like to work together in my functional nutrition coaching program. So you don't have to figure this all out on your own. I'll drop those links in the show notes for you. And whether you're just starting your journey or whether you've been at this for a while, I'm so glad we could spend this time together today. So stay tuned. Tune in for next week's episode. Until then, take care of yourself and your gut, and I will talk to you soon.